Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, from wherever you're joining us. Thank you again for joining one of the webinars that GNX organizes. This is the first one for 2026 that we're doing, and we hope to do a few of these more. If you enjoy the content, of course, please let us know. Before you ask, the recording of this event plus the slides will be shared after the event. So you should receive an email with the recording if you want the slides, or of course, any more information. Feel free to reach out via that email as well, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. So today I wanted to talk to you for the next, let's say, 25 minutes or so about what we call the real cost of connectivity. And that means, of course, we're talking about network connectivity here in the broadest sense of the word. We mean that the connectivity cost that actually involved goes much more beyond what you see on the monthly bill. Because when we look at a typical connectivity circuit, how the costs are built up are usually two components and maybe three. There's always what we call a non-recurring cost or one-time payment or whatever, or an installation fee to get a connectivity service delivered to you. That's a one-time fee for all the hardware and installation costs that are needed to get the connectivity service installed. And then the main component of the circuit is your monthly bill. So every month you get charged for the usage of that connectivity link. A third component could be indeed actual usage or overage over a data plan, like your 5G subscription or a Starlink connection that has a data plan connected to it. But that's usually the actual money that flows between the vendor and the customer, and the customer that actually uses the connectivity service. Today, we're not talking about that. Today, we're talking about everything else that is beyond that monthly charge. So what happens within a vendor, what happens within a customer, and what happens in between those to actually get to that monthly cost. Because of course, things are negotiated, we have projects that are run, and the real cost is actually build up of a lot of different components that may actually go much more beyond what you see on the monthly bill. What we will cover today is how a connectivity project actually comes together. So what are the components that we, from experience, usually see happening when it comes to designing a service, getting the service out, how do I actually procure different offers, what goes on in the delivery phase, and more and more. And then the next phase is about what actually happens with your network. So how do you run the network after the installation? And then, of course, that monthly bill starts rolling. But after that, what happens when something goes down, for example? What's the cost of that? What's the real impact? And how do SLAs play a part in that? And then the third is I want to share a little bit of a playbook with you, and something that we believe from experience would optimize for the total cost of ownership to be much more optimized without sacrificing performance or quality. If we look at a project connectivity lifecycle, we, as I said, see sort of three different aspects to it. Each phase adds a lot of complexity, adds more time, and of course adds cost to your investment. So if we go for the first phase, which is what we call the planning phase, this is the phase that you do not actually interact with a connectivity vendor yet. So a senior engineer, a network engineer, or a network architect, or sort of a hired consultant comes in to you as a customer with an international connectivity project that needs to be done. To start, we always come from a brownfield situation. There is not a greenfield network deployment anymore in the world. Everyone already has connectivity, and this is just a refresh, a re-architecture, or anything like that. Nothing is ever new, except for maybe new sites that open up or close. But just getting that architecture together, making sure that the network design is actually adhering to the standards that we're looking out for in 5 to 10 years into the future. Now, of course, with LLMs and AI changing everything that's happening on the network, latency becomes much more important, which is a topic we discussed in a previous webinar. Network topology, what's the target topology I'm looking for, failover strategies, uptime guarantees I need. Those are very, very important. And as you see, we estimate that a few weeks of that senior engineer, his or her time, will be spent on purely the architecture and design phase of that. And then if we continue to the phase where we start to collect offers. This can take anywhere between 2 weeks to 12 months. And with 12 months, I mean, those are the larger projects that are running for large international projects that are typically going through an RFP process, which is a highly structured approach to level the playing field between different vendors and to make sure you can compare different competitive offers. The problem with that process is that it takes a lot of time, not just in length, in duration, but also in actual time that it takes. If you have ever done one of these, you know that documents are being set up to describe requirements, fill in all kinds of compliancy details, and a lot of different situations. So the problem or the thing with RFPs is that they cost time. They cost money to make because you usually hire an independent consultant to write it for you. And now with AI and LLMs, the answering, I can tell you that all of the vendors that you get an answer from will have used AI to complete those questions. Everybody will have built sort of a RFP answering machine with their AI of choice. And there's good things in that, but there's also bad things in that I think are optimizable. Let's say it like that. And then finally, you get these offers in, and then you start looking at comparing them. Well, first of all, how do you compare them? Comparison, especially in the connectivity business, can be pretty tricky. I've said this before, and I've said this online in some articles that we've published. The terminology we use in the connectivity space is pretty weird. The thing that is, we are using the same words for different things, or we're using different words for the same thing. So for example, vendor A says we're best in class, or we give lowest price guarantee. And vendor B says we have guaranteed SLAs with a bazillion nines of uptime, whatever you want. And that's all great, but the thing is, what are they actually guaranteeing in that SLA? What do they mean with best in class? What is actually broadband, right? Those terms are not standardized, or they are somewhat standardized, but they're free to use because as network engineers, we're used to talk in protocols, right? If I meet a network engineer and we discuss BGP, we know exactly what we're talking about because those are standardized things and there's no discussion about it. But when it comes to buying and using connectivity services from ISPs and other vendors, this can be a whole different playing game. And then comes the comparison. So is the pricing you get actually competitive? What is pretty weird about the connectivity business is that it's a very local or regional business. You really have to be aware of the local game in the location that you're looking for connectivity. So I'm based in Amsterdam, and I know really well what's actually here, what I can actually get here in my house, because first of all, I'm interested in it. And second, I see ads popping up all over the place about local providers that can offer me connectivity. If I go to the office, which is in Utrecht in the Netherlands, the 5 minutes that I walk from the station to the office, I've usually seen at least two advertisements of internet service providers, either for a mobile provider or a wireline provider. And then I start getting a feeling for that. But what if you're the network engineer and you have to design for a factory in Mexico or a factory in Poland? Who are the local players there? And what is competitive pricing? We've had customers come into us with requests for saying we want 1 gigabit circuits across our entire estate, and then they have a few sites in the Middle East, one in Dubai, one in Qatar. And the pricing there is vastly different from what we're used to here in Western Europe. It could be like 100 times more expensive there for the same level of service. That's just how that market is. So if you first get that quote back for that 1 gigabit circuit and it's like 20,000 euros a month, you're like, you guys are crazy. Well, it is actually competitive. So, but how do you know? Then, of course, comes the migration. Is it seamless? Will we endure dual costs? SLAs, how do we discuss that? All kinds of extra things. And how good is the track record of the support team, which is necessarily important. But the biggest important part and key takeaway here is that different teams in the organization or different teams working in your company will have different views or different priorities about this. For example, for procurement, the pricing and SLAs will be on the top of their list in terms of priorities. For the executives, it will be everything encompassing, but they just want to make sure that all of the teams are in a happy place so that everything works and they don't spend too much money. For the network administrator and the IT team at the company, they want to spend their weekends and nights either sleeping or with their loved ones instead of being on calls with vendors trying to troubleshoot an outage. So having peace of mind is for them the most important factor in this whole process, which can be quite competing with other priorities of the other teams. So where is the decision making here is important. Then comes the next phase. How do we execute on this project? Well, first of all, we have to install the circuit. That takes anywhere from 4 to 12 weeks on a typical average. That is usually the average we see. About 80% of circuits are delivered between 6 to 8 weeks, and then we have sort of a quicker one and a slower one, which is 4 to 12 weeks. When you install a new circuit in your site, that of course comes with an engineer. So maybe some cables need to be installed. But you will always have parallel running circuits. When you migrate from one circuit to another, you will probably also do sort of a network redesign, which means you install new SD-WAN edge devices from a new vendor or just a new architecture that you're applying. So for a while, you're not going to do, when the new circuit is installed, you're not going to disconnect the other servers at the same day. There will be maybe even a few months in between those. Of course, you want to keep that period as short as possible, so you're not incurring double costs. Deep involvement is also needed from your engineering team, because migrating a site between different with live users running on it, and especially when it comes down to factories or other manufacturing facilities, that is absolutely key to get right. And then comes the full life cycle. So how do we actually, so now everything's running, we've paid the one-time fee, and now the monthly cost starts rolling. What else do we have then? Well, of course, there's day-to-day operations. Hopefully, you don't have to deal with anything regarding the actual running of the network. But other than that, I still need to monitor. I need to watch for alerts. There will maybe maintenance on these links that I need to process, that my team is aware that one of, or maybe multiple links will go down at some point. The site may grow, so then I need to make sure that I have a process in place for upgrades or downgrades or adds or changes, which is what we call MACDs. But that whole incident management and escalation that goes around it is even more important. So this is a phase that never ends. It's a very underestimated part of your whole total cost of ownership. It's almost not calculatable, but we will do our best. Adding it all up, you see where I'm going. The human capital that you invest in a connectivity project is much higher than the actual monthly charge that you pay to the provider. I mean, if we deploy a connectivity project, of course, we spend time on it, our vendor spends time on it, all that cost is somehow wrapped up in that monthly charge. So, of course, our costs are already wrapped in there, but your cost is not. And for a typical large estate, we believe that maybe 3 times the cost of the monthly charge will be spent in human capital over the life cycle of a certain service. So hundreds of hours are spent, maybe thousands. There's months and months of migration when it comes to like 100 service project. And of course, that all eats into your total cost, but it's usually overlooked. So let me run you through a simple calculation here. If we take a pretty decently sized factory where we have about 200 production workers, we have about 150 office workers that are in the same plant or in the same campus in an office building. Those employees all have a cost. Now, let's say the site goes down for 2 hours. That's an immediate revenue loss of manufacturing. It's an immediate productivity loss for all the office workers that have to either travel home or go to coffee shops to redo their Teams calls. And your loss is in the thousands and thousands of euros. Not even talking about actual revenue loss from the manufacturing that you sell. Pure loss in hours wasted of people that are waiting for a link to be recovered. We also can't really estimate what the recovery cost would be. Maybe there's like links that need to be repaired. Then there needs to be digging, which means that your site manager needs to be in place for the people to actually repair the links and stuff. There's a lot of physical things still happening when it comes to connectivity. So the gap between, and then you go to your connectivity player and you scream at them and you escalate them, and then the link is repaired after a few hours. And then you say, now I want my costs recouped. Well, it's hard to justify that hundreds of thousands of euros of revenue loss due to an outage can be refunded on a connectivity link that's 200 euros a month, right? We wish that it's possible, but there's no capital. There's not really a financial way to really solve that problem. So what typically happens is that companies pay credits, meaning we deduct costs from next bills that are your monthly charge or 2 times your monthly charge maybe. But what do you get back then? Then you get 3, 4, 500 euros back, but your costs are huge. Your costs may be in the hundreds of thousands. So impact on business is always multiple times bigger than what your SLA will always get. I'm a firm believer, and I've said this in multiple events as well, that I always say jokingly, SLAs are pieces of paper. Peace of mind is something that you don't get. Of course, you need SLAs to keep each other accountable, to make sure that you actually have something to fall back on a legal basis. But the actual return that you get from that SLA is never going to cover the cost of your business, the impact on your business. So don't see them as I have this 49%, this 99.999% uptime circuit, I'm safe. Unfortunately, things will break and fail, and it's more of the cost how you deal with that rather than okay, now I'm gonna sue my ISP and make sure that I get the money back, because unfortunately that's not how the world works, and that's also not how it should work. I think that the impact on business should be looked at differently with alternative solutions, and just making sure that you're really aware of that impact rather than trying to cover everything in purely a piece of paper or a contract. And then with that example that I just said, by the way, that 2 hours of downtime, did you know that on a 99.9% uptime circuit, which is a very normal SLA that we typically see on DIA links, of course, higher is possible, but that's usually not on field deployed equipment. It's usually 99.9. That SLA allows for 9 hours of downtime on a yearly basis. Again, we just did the math. That's a big impact on your business if that actually happens. And the ISP will not be responsible for anything. They will help you, hopefully, but they're not responsible for any of these costs. So it's not preventing you from anything. Like I said, accountability is an important thing. We have to have a contract between each other, that we keep each other honest, and that we are running for you when there is an issue, but it will never cap the actual bill that you have in reliability. So big point here, when you make your decision for an ISP, make sure it's based on historic performance. So make sure that it's based off how reliable are your SLA numbers. Do you actually meet them? Can you share me data about them? And then the second question is, how good quality is your support team? Can they fix issues relatively quickly? Of course, if there's cable breaks, that's a completely different story, because then physical installations have to happen and people have to go on site and do things. So then timing becomes very, very difficult to plan. But with network related issues, with quality of link related issues like packet loss or latency, how good is your support team in making sure that those things are getting troubleshooted in the correct way and in a short amount of time? So let me share you some strategies that we think, based off customers that we spoke to when preparing for this webinar, and also what we have learned from the last, let's say, 20 years that we've been doing this business together. And it comes as a sort of a no-brainer, but preparation is key. But not just preparation in, I'm going to write down this beautiful RFP, and I'm going to write down all the requirements that I need, and I'm going to lock them down in this nice contract with expectations, but do it based off performance, right? Make sure that you design for all aspects of a link. So not just, I need a certain upload speed and download speed and an SLA. No, what are your targets for latency and to what destinations, right? Where is the data that you're accessing on that site? Is that in another location? Is that up in the cloud somewhere? And if so, what cloud and on what location of the cloud? So then we can actually much better compare the results of, okay, if I'm implementing Cato SD-WAN or Palo Alto SD-WAN, SASE, for example, and my web traffic needs to be inspected by the SASE cloud, how is the traffic routed to Cato networks, to the nearest Cato POP or to the nearest Palo Alto POP? Does my ISP have proper private peerings, or does it need to cross half the internet to eventually end up there? So map your sites correctly with the requirements and criticality that you need. And try to include total cost of ownership in evaluation and not just look at that monthly charge. Second, how to run a project effectively. Like I said, large RFPs can take months and months and months, even up to a year to complete. Like I said, in the age of AI that we're in, we can take this RFP, throw it into an LLM that comes up with pretty decent answers. We make some adjustments, and again, we wrote this nice 50-page document to you back that you have to read and process and make sure that everybody's talking about the same thing to each other. Why not reduce this to a super clean template? So standardizing sort of an RFP for connectivity would be something that is going to save so much time for a lot of people, where I can take it down from months to like 1 or 2 weeks. Because the reason why it's such a long duration of these projects is because there's so much documentation in place. So you also need to wait for those responses because people need to prepare those responses, of course. So reducing a vendor shortlist pretty early. It's fine collecting 20 or 30 quotes from everybody, but reduce it to top 2 or top 3 if you need to, because that saves so much time in negotiating and making sure we standardize on all of these different offers. And we think that a well-run project can cut significant cost in the total bill, because like I said, the costs of the ISP, the costs of companies like GNX will be included in that monthly charge. And the longer your RFP takes, unfortunately, we have to do something with our cost. Choosing the right provider. This again sounds like a no-brainer, but like I already mentioned a few times in the past few slides, look at performance. Do data-driven decision-making, not gut feeling. If I walk from the train station to my office and I see an ad from a service provider, I actually wrote a blog about this on my personal blog. They said, we're the network for gamers. And I'm like, okay, but what do you mean with that? What is it? What is the best network for gamers? And then it comes into play what I just said about SASE vendors. How do they connect to the nearest Cato POP? How do they connect to the nearest Netscope POP for inspecting your web traffic before it hits the internet? If that already crosses multiple countries to get there, that's going to introduce a lot of latency and a lot of bad user experience. And of course, nobody's perfect. So make sure that you are going to deal with providers that have proper proven infrastructure and support. Have they done a redesign of their core network recently? How up to date are their POPs? Are they growing? Are they expanding into new regions? How good is their support team? So that is and just ask for references. Ask to talk to support people, for example, instead of just salespeople. So support quality, to me, is much more important than uptime numbers. And then, again, quality over cost. I'm not saying you should go for the highest cost option. I'm not saying you should go for the cheapest option. The answer is, as anything in IT, it depends. It depends what you're looking for. If I'm going to install 6 different broadbands on a site, one of them will probably work, right? So then I always have a link up. I'm going to install just one circuit. I probably want to ensure that it's a very high quality circuit that gives my IT engineers enough sleep and enough rest with their loved ones. So fewer incidents is of course what we're looking for. And if there are incidents, that are solved in the correct way. And then the balance is always somewhere here in the middle. Having the right balance between performance, quality, and cost is going to be the most important strategy here. And then, of course, is there an answer, right? Isn't there an easier way to do all of this? Well, I think there is, right? What if it would be possible if you could skip the whole RFP process, or still do it, but already have a lot of comparison already, compare vendors instantly and manage everything through a single platform that you can use yourself without having to talk to a lot of different people? Well, that's why I'd love to introduce to you what we do. GNX is more than a connectivity platform. We are an ISP aggregator that are available in 190 plus countries, where we aggregated thousands of local suppliers into a single model that you can consume through a single support center, through a single invoice, and a single contact that you can call. And the most important part of all is that we have a single platform that you can do everything yourself. So no need to go through all kinds of different hassles and things. We have done the aggregation of data and cleared that out and made sure that it is as transparent as possible that we can offer to you. So the whole connectivity lifecycle at your fingertips. We've recently redid our entire service design workflow, so you can actually go in as a network designer, start uploading your sites, and start playing around with different bandwidths, different service types, different access technologies, and different diversity requirements, and see what's out there. Our goal was 6 months ago was to have as much pricing as quick and firm as possible. In our business, we always talk about budgetary and firm pricing. To me, that's not a binary thing. To me, that's a scale. There is some firmness in a certain pricing or not. Nothing is ever 100% firm and committed and set into stone. But as firm as possible is what we're going for, which means that over the last 6 months, we've heavily improved how much pricing we can give you with live quoting, live availability checking, and with firm pricing. And then after we've gone through the whole procurement process with you, the whole service lifecycle management is also included in the platform for free. So everything that you do with us, you can see through the platform and take exactly what you need at what point in time. We monitor all your circuits with our own service and own network management tools, which means that you have your SASE or SD-WAN dashboard on one hand, and then you have the GNX monitoring on the other hand to make sure that they're saying that they're not lying about anything that they're seeing there, which we think which we hear about quite a lot and which customers really appreciate on our solution. So we don't necessarily tie into your SD-WAN dashboard, but we give you sort of an overlay that you can put on top of that. And most importantly, our support team relies heavily on this data because that's exactly what we want to share. If we don't want to waste time exchanging 100 emails about collecting data, we want it to be as ready as possible when an issue may start to occur. Again, high quality support is what we're aiming for. I want to thank you for listening in. I hope this was of interest to you. My name is Rick. I'm the CTO of GNX. If you have any question regarding either this webinar, anything you want to talk about with connectivity basis, my email is on this page. I'm always available for you. Please scan this QR code if you're interested to learn more about our website. And for sure, look at LinkedIn or any other communication method we have, because we'll definitely do more of these webinars for the remainder of the year. Thank you very much for attending. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them.